Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day. Today we're going to talk about course in general linguistics part 2 because this is a very long essay and we haven't covered let's say half of it maybe. I've only covered the first half in the first video. So let's dive right into it. Synchronic linguistics. Saussure gives us more ideas about what he means by synchronic linguistics at the beginning of part 2. He says that the aim of general synchronic linguistics is to set up the fundamental principles of any idiosynchronic system, the constituents of any language state. So what does this sentence mean? It basically means that when you have a language state, when you have a language at a short span of time without a change, you go through the, let's say, related elements in that language. You go through the idiosynchronic system. It means one language at one time, and you study those things. That's the goal of synchronic linguistics. And it's generally more difficult than historical or diachronic linguistics because, in historical linguistics, you're dealing with some facts and some changes, so they're more tangible, we can say. But in language states, it's a little bit difficult to understand how different phenomena are related to each other because you're not going through history, you're going through a short span of time. And that might make your work a little bit difficult. And here I have put a reminder that in practice, language state is not just a moment, but it's a span of time during which the modifications in language are minimal. And again, another reminder is that absolute state is defined by absence of changes. And of course, this isn't possible because language changes no matter what we do. In spite of everything, it changes. So in studying a language state, in practice, it means disregarding some changes of little importance. So basically, this is a simplification of data that I talked about in the last video. So nothing very difficult in this part. The second chapter, concrete entities of language, definition of entity and unit. So it's important here that the signs that make up language are not abstractions but real objects. Signs and their relations are what linguistics study. They are the concrete entities of our science. So signs are the concrete entities of linguistic sciences. That's something you should keep in mind. So the concrete entity is signs. The linguistic entity exists only through the associating of the signifier with the signified. Whenever only one element is retained, the entity vanishes. What does that mean? So if I just have this cat, if I just have the sound and not the concept, for example, let's say I'm talking to a Russian person who doesn't know English, and I say cat. For him, this sound makes no sense because it has not been connected to a concept in his mind. So anytime you separate the signifier from the signified, you're faced with mere abstraction, because only once you get a linguistic fact when you have the succession of sounds supporting an idea. If, for example, a cat goes to the concept of, a cat like with this, a tail like this, if you go with the concept of the cat, then you have a sign, and then you have a linguistic entity. But other than that, when they're separated, you don't have an entity. You're just faced with signifier and signified. The linguistic entity is not accurately defined until it is delimited. So delimited means it is separated from everything that surrounds it on the phonic chain. These delimited entities or units stand in opposition to each other in the mechanism of language. So how do I explain this? For example, let's say I say this is a cat. Okay. In this statement, I have to, let's say, let me choose my pen. I have to separate the boundaries between these different elements. So I say, because I know English, I know that this is a separate entity, and then is a separate entity, a and cat. Okay, and these are all known to me because of their difference with other, let's say, signs. For example, I know cat because I also know tree, and I also know bat, and I also know hat. So I know what these are all. So I contrast them in my mind, and then I get the idea. This is very important in Saussurean linguistics, because that's exactly what everything boils down to. Language is difference. That's what he wants to say, and he says it painfully in a lot of different chapters, and in a very long essay, but I have tried to include most of it here so that you would get a good comprehensive idea. But this is what we mean by delimiting it. So we are showing here the boundaries of different words and different signs, so that we can understand the different entities. So each of them is an entity. And remember, I use the word entity a little bit synonymous with word, but that's not correct. Let's say that entity is a sign, because not all signs are words, and you have to know this. Not all signs are words. Sometimes signs can be visual, sometimes signs can be conceptual, different forms. So remember that the entity is a sign, not exactly a word. But in language, for simplifying the data, we often try to use the word as the, let's say, basic unit of language. The only definition that Saussure himself gives the unit of language here is that it's a slice of sound which, to the exclusion of everything that precedes it and follows it in the spoken chain, is the signifier of the certain concept. So what does this mean? So it means that when I write the word cat here, and then I have is a cat here, for example, after it and before it I have different things. So I should know that this cat is separate from a here and is, and this is the signifier of a certain concept of the cat, let's say this animal here. So this is what a unit means: a slice of sound which, to the exclusion of the everything that precedes it and follows it in the phonic chain, signifies a certain concept. That's what a unit means. Okay, so it can be a word or it can be different things. We don't know. In short, language is a system of contrasts, and units only gain their identity when they're cut out from the flow of sound in the spoken chain and placed in opposition to each other. Okay, good. Method of delimitation. Saussure's method consists of using speaking as the source material of language and picturing two parallel chains, one of concepts, which is A, let me write that here, concepts, and B, sound images, which we are mostly working with sound here. Of course, the written forms are the images, but I work with sounds mostly. I have a let's say example from the book itself, from the essay itself, that I found really interesting. It's in French, and I think it's really illuminating. Take the French word si je l'apprends. Okay, this is how you pronounce this, and we have to delimit this. Okay, for example, let's say si je la and then prends. If we put D and D prim here. Okay, so in the phonic chain that you see here, you see that they're all like next to each other. If I didn't say si je l'apprends, you wouldn't have known what this word is, okay? Because you don't know the phonic differences. You don't know if, for example, sige is a unit, or l'apprend is a unit, or for example, si is a unit on its own, You know, that's what I mean. You wouldn't have known the different sounds unless I told you so, or unless you know French. So, this is a sentence that we can read in two ways. The only possible divisions are si je la prends, if I take it, which is the one I've written here. So here si is the sound, for example, a prim here. Si is the sound, and then the concept is if. The meaning of it, the signification of it is if. Or here the sound is je, and the meaning is I. Not I'm, I. Okay, so this is what we mean by the double chain here that we have signified. And this is what it means. And the other form of reading this is si je l'apprends. Si je l'apprends. I connected the L to apprendre. It means if I learn it. So as you can see, one sentence can have two different meanings just because I can read the different phonic chains in a different manner. They're determined by the meaning attached to the words. If, for example, si je l'apprends didn't have a meaning, then this wouldn't be possible. I wouldn't have this option here for me. I would only have this one. But here it can be the object, la, can be the object, and then it can be connected to apprendre, and then it can create a whole new meaning. And then I know this because I know French and I know how the phonic system of French works. So this is important. You have to know how the phonic system works. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be able to disconnect these different entities here, because you don't know which one signifies what. You don't even know that. So that's what I wanted to say. And there's something else that I wanted to say, that when we, for example, cut the chain from sigil, like this, sigil, or something like that. I can't pronounce it because it's not a unit. This division is wrong. Neither is the syllabic division si je l'apprends to be taken for granted as having a linguistic value. So these two divisions have linguistic values, while the other divisions that I just talked about that were absurd didn't have any value. I wanted to stress this particularly because we will deal with value a lot in the future, and it's a very important concept in linguistics, or Saussurean linguistics at least. Practical difficulties of delimitation. Now, the delimitation isn't a process that is very easy and, let's say, straightforward, because, first of all, I told you that there has been a lot of argument about whether a word can be the unit we need in linguistics. Sometimes using a word is incompatible because of many reasons that I don't think is necessary to say, but if I wanted to give you an example that is present in the essay itself, it's the difference between cheval and cheveux. Okay, so this means horse in French, and cheval is the singular form, cheveux is the plural form. So here's the question: if I wanted to consider word as the unit, are these two separate units, or are they the same unit with different forms? How would I classify this exactly? And this is what Saussure kind of invokes. He's like, if we have the relationships like this, then how can we consider the word as a unit? It's a little bit problematic. But I'm gonna give you a hint here, and the hint is that he finally goes back to the word again because of the lack of another good unit. So he at the same time doesn't agree with putting the word as the unit of language, or as the entity, but he doesn't have a choice, let's say. And then after many arguments that he makes in the essay, he goes back to this fact that word is still the best thing we can deal with, so we have no choice, that's what we have to do. But as I said, it presents some difficulties, like the one I just mentioned here between cheval and chevaux. And another theory that he mentions is that let's make sentences as the concrete units of language. But this one is even more useless, because it's worse, because in sentences the diversity is so much that we can't find similarities to classify anything. And then when we look at sentence, funnily enough, the only common denominator that we found is the word again. So again, the word in the sentence is the only thing that is in common with other sentences and can be classified. So as I said, he goes back to the word, and then this is just, let's say, a process of him figuring out what he wants to say. Maybe it wasn't that important for you to know, but I wanted to include it here as well. Finally, he gets to this. In history, do we have units? No, we don't. We might have eras, but they are not units. They're different. They're per periods of time. So he says that we don't know what units are in history, but does it matter? We can study history without knowing the answer of what is a unit. So he's like, maybe we can do the same in linguistics too. We don't necessarily have to know what a unit is, but we can work with words and signs and other things to kind of figure out what we are dealing with. And again, this very important statement is made here, that language is characterized as a system based entirely of the opposition of its concrete units. So based on the opposition of different words, different signs, we can understand language. He repeats that quite a few times, so I'm just gonna pass over it and get to the next part. Identities, realities, and values. What is synchronic identity? So this part gets a little difficult for me to explain, so pay attention. Let's say we have two sentences, je ne sais pas, I don't know, and ne dites pas cela, don't say that. They contain the same element pas. So the ideal question, one might say, is that there is identity because the same slice of sound carries the same meaning in the two sentences. So there is identity. That's what identity means. So basically, identity is maybe we can say definition here, identity of the word. So here we have the same sound and same concept, so everything is okay. However, if the correspondences of slices of sounds and concepts is proof of identity, the reverse is not true. There can be identity without this correspondence. Now, what do I mean by that? For example, the concept of exhaustion or being tired. It appears in épuisé, à bout du souffle, and fatigué. These all share the same concept, exhausted and tired. But as you can see, the sound doesn't correspond. Fatigué and épuisé have two different sounds completely. So the reverse here that we mentioned is not true. It doesn't mean that if you have similar concepts, you are gonna have similar sounds. So don't take it as a, let's say, evidence or as a rule set in stone that if you have correspondence, you have identity. That's not true. Identity can exist in spite of correspondence. For example, here the identity of épuisé and fatigué can be the same thing, being tired or exhausted, being the same concept, having the same definition, but the sounds don't match up. So that's what he wants to tell us. And he gives different examples here. For example, the word paume, apple, and paume, palm of the hand. Having the same sound but different concepts. So again, this doesn't work. So we have different identities here even though we have same sounds. That's what he wants to say. So identity is something separate from the sound and the concept. And And it can be roughly said that is the definition of or characterization of a linguistic unit. That's the meaning of identity. And here I've written a note: the bond between the two uses of the same word depends neither on material identity nor on the sameness in meaning, but on elements which must be sought after and which will point out the true nature of linguistic units. So what does this mean? Let's imagine I am in a meeting. I think I misspelled that, but whatever. I'm in a meeting and I say, for example, one time I say, gentlemen. And then I say, gentlemen. And then I say, gentlemen. I shouted a little bit. I don't know if you understood the three different forms that I just tried to make, but I pronounced it in different ways. So each time I made a phonic difference in pronouncing this gentleman, and each time the meaning of this word is the same. Gentleman means one thing, gentleman. But the bond between the two uses of the same words doesn't depend on the sameness of the sound or the sameness of the meaning, but on elements which must be sought after and outside it, which are the conditions. So here, for example, you don't know what condition I'm in when I'm in a meeting and I'm shouting gentlemen, but different conditions mean different meanings and different identities. So the word gentleman doesn't have the same identity when I repeat it 2 times. And that's what we mean by this sentence, that it doesn't depend on similarities of the meaning or sound. I can repeat the same thing with a little phonic difference but the same meaning, but the different identity is going to be there. So there's not an exact correspondence. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I thought maybe I had another note here, but I don't think anything else comes to my mind, so let's go to the other slide. Finally, linguistic value, which is really important. And this first slide is a little bit confusing, so bear with me while I finish this and then get to the next slide, which is going to be very illuminating. So, in Saussure's idea, language is this diagram. Not language, let me try to correct myself. Thought and sound is this diagram. So we have an indefinite plane of jumbled ideas, which is A. So concepts or ideas are here. As you can see, it's like a wave thing. It's a mass, it's not a clean cut thing. And then we have a equally vague plane of sounds, which is B. Again, it's a mass. Okay, so Saussure is saying that our thoughts and the sounds that we know are both chaotic masses, and they don't really make sense of their own. And that's where language comes in. The characteristic role of language with respect to thought is not to create a material phonic means for expressing ideas. So it means that ideas aren't pre-existent in your mind and then you find the sound and then you signify them or say them. That's exactly the opposite. Language serves as a link between thought and sound under conditions that of necessity bring about the reciprocal delimitations of unit. So what does this mean? Basically, it means that language is there to shape your thoughts, and then those thoughts are going to be worded out in different phonic units. And those units are different. As I said, for example, this is a cat. You are aware that this is another unit, and then is, and then a, and cat. So this is the limitation of it. And so linguistics, for him, works in the borderland where elements of sound and thought combine. So that's completely understandable. Thought and sound combine, and then instead of these chaotic masses, we have something ordered and structured. That's what language does. The combination of sound and thought produces a form, not a substance. What does this mean? So after a bit of a reflection, I realized that he means that by form, he's trying to imply that there is something with the structure. Okay, and not something like a substance. So language creates something that has a structure with relationships between different elements, but substance is something with an inherent presence and an inherent essence, and that's not what we want here, because that's exactly the opposite. Language works in differences, so there is not exactly an inherent essence going on here with the combination of sound and thought. There's only difference, and there's only system, and there's only structure or a form. And an important quotation here I have in regards with value. Let's read it together. It says, in addition, the idea of value as defined shows that to consider a term as simply the unit of a certain sound with a certain concept is grossly misleading. So this is very illuminating. So just to think that a term, for example, let me find the space to have a diagram. For example, let's say we have the signifier and the signified. Okay, so if you consider that value is a term that simply shows the union of these two, you are completely wrong. Okay, to define it in this way would isolate the term from its system. It would mean assuming that one can start from terms and construct a system by adding them together, when on the contrary, it's from the interdependence whole that one must start and through analysis obtain its elements. So it's exactly the opposite of what you might think. You might think that you start from the level of word and then you go up and construct different words and then you understand the whole. But it's the other way around. Because of value, because of something called value, we are faced with the system first, and then we go on to understand the different elements in a system and obtain it, by analysis obtain its elements. So don't think of value as something that just connects signified with the signifier. We're going to talk about this more in the next slide. So let me just go there, and before you get confused, let's look at this table that I've created, which is going to help. And then I have an illustration which is going to help very much. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so synchronic identity and value. Okay, definition. What a linguistics unit is within a system at a given time. So this is synchronic identity. So what a linguistic unit is, maybe its definition we can say. I'm not totally sure that we can say a definition, but this is what you can basically understand if you read Saussure's idea of identity. He's basically like its definition. And then value is what the unit means or signifies in relation to other units. This is very important. So this is how synchronic identity and value are different. Don't think that value is something that connects the signifier to the signified. No, it connects each sign to the or each unit to other different units. And the focus of synchronic identity is on internal structure and function in the current system, but for value, it's a relational contrast with other units. Example, the word bat has a synchronic identity as a noun with multiple senses. Its value depends on the context: bat, club, bat, bird, etc. So that's let's say ironically and paradoxically, the definition or identity of a word can be known as long as we know the value of the word. Because identity itself is not complete. We can't say, as I mentioned before, that it means definition, and then when I say bat, you understand, okay, this is a bat. I know the flying bird, or the, let's say, the club, the hitting club is bat. No, that's not exactly the identity. The identity of this word is that it is a noun, and we know that it has different meanings. But then we don't know what those meanings are until we understand value. when we understand value, we know that, okay, bat in one context is a bird and in one context is a piece of wood. That's how it works. So the analogy that Saussure uses a lot is that of a chess game. Like a chess pieces a role on the board, the synchronic identity is the role of the word in linguistics system. But like a piece's strategic importance in a game, the value is dependent on the other chess pieces and on the whole condition of the game. So the strategic importance comes out only when you know the rules of the game and when you are playing in a system. And then Saussure's view is that identity is shaped by systematic position. Value emerges from difference and opposition. This is something that we've repeated a lot of times, so I'm not gonna stay on it and focus on it too much. But I just want to say that identity is about placement, while value is about differentiation. Okay. And there is a good example of a coin that I wanted to mention, but we have it in the next slides as well. But I'm going to say it here, and then maybe I'll repeat it there for you to know better, because I want you to understand this. For example, a gold coin's synchronic identity might be its weight, its purity, and its denomination. But its value depends on the market conditions, the currency contrast, and the other conditions that rule the economy. Okay, so that's the difference between identity and value. You're going to understand that a lot better when I show you this slide. So when we think of value, Saussure says something very important here. He's saying that we generally think of the property of standing for an idea. Okay, that's value. And this is one side of linguistic value. But if this is true, how is value different from signification? Then how is value different from the meaning of the word? We know that it's different from identity because identity is about placement in language. Okay, so I want you to understand these three concepts. We have identity, value, and signification. These are completely different things. Identity is about the placement of the word and the internal structure. Value is about the relational structure, and then signification is something else that I'm going to talk about right now. Saussure says that value is doubtless one element in signification, and it's difficult to see how signification can be dependent upon value and still be distinct from it, but he makes a point out of it. Here's the paradox. On the one hand, the concept seems to be the counterpart of the sound image. So, look at this here, the vertical arrow that I just painted. The counterpart of the sound image or signifier is the signified or the concept. And on the other hand, the sign itself, so the circle here, let me draw the circle, okay, the sign itself in turn is the counterpart of other signs of language. This one, sign number 1, sign number 2. So I think you understood what it means now. Signification means the relationship between signifier and signified, and that's the signification of it. But value, and this is the vertical arrow, very importantly, but value is the relationship between different signs. So this is the horizontal arrow. So this is what Saussure says, and he says how can then we confuse signification with value? They're completely two different things, two different axes. Putting it in another way, it's like the sheet of paper is cut in two. It's clear that the relation between the different pieces of, for example, A, B, C, D is distinct from the relation between the front and back of the page, which is A', B', C, and D. So these are different signs. These ones, A, B, C, D, different signs, different relations. We understand that they're distinct. And then A versus A'. So this is the sheet of paper. This one is a sheet of paper, which is the signifier and the signified on the front and back. So this is how signification is different from value. Now, let's go to the next slide. I hope you understood the difference between signification, value, and identity, because I tried to make it as clear as possible. Now, we have some, let's say, more information about value. Oh, I went to the last slide again. Okay. Saussure says a general rule about value, and that's two parts. Um, the values are always composed of dissimilar things that can be exchanged for the thing of which the value is to be determined, and of similar things that can be compared with the things which the value of it is going to be determined. So what do I mean by this? Again, for example, imagine a piece of coin. Saussure himself gives the example of a 5 franc coin. So it can be exchanged for something that is completely dissimilar to it, like a piece of bread. I can give a 5 franc gold piece and then get a bread, something dissimilar, but the values are similar. And then it can be compared with a similar value of the same system, like 1 franc coin instead of 5 franc coin. So it's a similar thing, but with a different, let's say, value, with a different value is the best thing I can come up with, honestly. This is so difficult to explain. And how do we understand this in linguistics? So the example he says, I think, is very illuminating. So we have the French word mouton, which is sheep for English. Okay, so if you want to consider this is the circle that we have. So mouton, sheep. Of course, here I'm writing the translation. This is not exactly a signifier and signified, but I just want you to understand that mouton is sheep, and then that's what we mean by it. Now, here, mouton and sheep don't have the same value. They are two different signifiers, so maybe this illustration is not very good, but just bear with me, because I want you to understand that mouton is the signifier for sheep, the concept of sheep. Maybe if I draw one here, I can't draw sheep. Okay, maybe if I draw one here, it will be more illuminating. So, mouton and sheep don't have the same value. How do I say this? Because when we are talking about a piece of meat that is ready to eat and to be served in English, we use the word mutton instead of sheep. So sheep and mouton in French don't have the same value, because mouton in French can be used as a meat that can be served, but sheep is not something that we use when we want to serve food. We use mutton instead. So as you can see, the relation between different words makes the context that we use them in different. So I hope this helps. I don't know really how to explain it further, but if you had any questions, ask me in the comments. I think this might get a little bit complex at times, but if you watch this again, maybe you could get the hang of it. And what I've written here is that its value clearly depends on what is outside and around it, on the conditions around it. So the value of something is not just the relation between signifier and signified. This is the third time that I'm repeating this. It's the horizontal axis, so the difference between different signs and the different conditions and contexts. And again, Saussure repeats himself that we know that concepts are differential and they're not defined by their positive content, but by negatively by their differences and by their relations. Their most precise characteristic is being what the others are not. So cat is cat exactly because it is not bat, and that's what we know in language. That's how our mind works according to Saussure. So if I state simply that a word signifies something when I have in mind the associating of a sound image with a concept, I'm making a statement that may suggest what actually happens, but by no means am I expressing the linguistic fact in its essence and fullness. Why does he say that? Because he's again considering the idea of value. So if I say that, for example, sheep stands for this fluffy animal here, I'm dealing with a mere concept and a mere sound image. In isolation, I wouldn't know what sheep meant if I, for example, didn't have another sign which was cow. Wow, my drawing skills are really great. So this exactly is the reason why this value is the reason why I can understand this relationship. So only the difference between signifier and signified is not enough for you to understand the language. That's what he's trying to say. So linguistic value from a material point of view, and by material we mean the sound image. So the conceptual side of value is made up of relations and differences. And the same can be said of the material side of it. They are again different and relational. The important thing in the word is not the sound alone, but the phonic differences that make it possible to distinguish this word from all other words with the differences that they carry signification. For example, I say here is a cat. If I didn't know English properly, I would say here's a cat. What does that mean? Is that a word? I don't know. But I know English, so I know that this phonic chain is to be separated like this. Here is a cat. And I know that because each phonic part corresponds to a concept. For example, I know the concept of here, I know the concept of is as being, I know and I know cat. So this is the material viewpoint for value. I can understand the different terms because I understand that they have different values, and I can understand that because in the material sense, in the written form or in this sound image or the sound that I'm producing, I know the differences. So phonemes again are not characterized by their positive quality, but simply by the fact that they're distinct. So I know that here is a cat is different from here is a bat because the B and the C here are different. So B here is one phoneme and C here is another phoneme, and they're different. So that's what makes me understand that there are two different words. So the differences again are what are important here, not the positive quality of the sounds themselves. And this applies to writing as well. Saussure mentions writing here briefly as well. So the signs used in writing are arbitrary, obviously, because we said that the whole relationship between signifier and signified is arbitrary. There is no connection. For example, between the letter T and the sound T that I make. For example, this could have been D. This could have been Y or something else. Or Z. I don't know. But this is arbitrary. I made it up. I made up language. And the value of the letters is purely negative and differential. The same person can write T in 3 different forms, for example, but the only requirement is that the sign for T not be confused in the scripts with, for example, D or L or A, whatever. So it doesn't matter how I write it, as long as it's T and not something else, I can recognize it. So this is what we mean from value as a material point of view. So they become different only in relation to each other. So if you understand that value is relational and related to differences, you can, I think, understand the whole thing. Understand that value controls signs, phonemes, and concepts. The values makes them what are different. the sign considered in its totality. Okay, this is the part where it gets a little bit difficult. Oh, for me, because I had a lot of trouble understanding this myself. So, everything that we said till now is that language is made up of differences. And this is going to blow your mind or be very paradoxical for you, so bear with me. Um, so, in language, there are only differences without positive terms. When we take the signified or the signified, language has neither ideas nor sounds that existed before linguistic systems, but only conceptual and phonic differences that have issued from the system. If you remember that painting I showed you of the masses of thought and chaotic forms, let me see if I can find it. So, language is that here, this one. Okay, before language, this is what we're dealing with, and after language, we have a system. So, language doesn't before language we have neither ideas nor sounds that exist. Okay, now we understand that from the differences that they have, but here's the big but that we want to talk about. The statement that everything is in language is negative is true only if we talk about the signified and the signifier considered separately. When we consider the sign in its totality, we have something that is positive in its own class. Now, what does that even mean? Because this was so confusing for me. So, both signifiers and signifieds are defined by contrast, not by an intrinsic essence. Okay. And this is what we call the negative nature of language, because it's defined by negativity and by differences. But the sign cat, the word, let's say, is a real functional element in language, and it's not just contrast that makes me understand cats. It's a usable, recognizable sign. So the parts are negative, but the whole sign is positive. Why? Because it exists as a unit in a system. It can be used and recognized, and it's something positive. It has value within the structure of a language. So all this time we have been saying that we understand things by their differences, but the sign itself is something positive. So I know cat exists. This is a unit in a system. It can be recognized and understood. This is positive. Okay. When we compare signs which are positive terms with each other, then we are not speaking of differences, but we are speaking of distinctions. Okay. What do I mean by this? Let's say we have here the importance of terminology for Saussure. He's trying to tell us that, for example, when we have the idea of father or mother as two ideas and separate concepts, then they are negative. Then I understand father as it is not mother. Okay. But when I have father itself as a sign, okay, it is distinct from mother only because it has a positive presence and essence itself that is different from mother. So here we are not talking about differences but distinctions, and that's what you have to know, that distinction and difference are not the same thing. So this is what gets everything a little bit difficult, because you might say that distinction and difference is the same thing. What is this ridiculous terminology? But it's not. Difference carries with it a negativity, an idea of negative state, but distinct doesn't. Distinct just shows that there are two positive terms that are separate from each other, distinct from one another. Between them, there is only opposition. And the whole operation of language, the whole mechanism, is based on oppositions of this kind and on the phonic and conceptual differences that they imply. So it's the mechanism of language is based on two different things. First, on the opposition of the signs that are positive terms, and then on the conceptual and phonic differences between the signifieds and the signifiers. So we have one difference and one distinction, two different groups. So two signs are not different in the same ways that the sounds and our ideas are. Two signs are distinct. They occupy separate positions in the system of language. So difference is the contrast between elements, sound or concepts, phonic and conceptual differences, but distinctness is a structural separation between signs as units. I hope this illuminates it because I wrote this note in red so that this is like basically the summary of everything that I've said. So I hope you understood this part. It's a little bit difficult, I know, because we've been talking about differences all along and suddenly we say that it's not different, it's distinct. But that's what it is, and I can't really do anything about it. I hope you understood it perfectly. So the next part is a lot easier. Syntagmatic and associative relations. This is very easy. So in this course, as we said, if you remember in the first video, I said that we have linearity. We go when we talk and when we make sentences, we go in a linear manner. Okay. And the elements are arranged in a sequence of in a chain of speaking. The combinations supported by linearity are syntagms, as I highlighted here. For example, this is a cat. This sentence is a syntagm. They are arranged and with consecutive units. Or here we have the French contre tout, against everyone. In syntagm, a term acquires its value only because it stands in opposition to everything that precedes it or follows it or both. Okay, so syntagm is a linear thing that finds its opposition to everything that precedes it or follows it. Okay, for example, I have my sentence here, or I have my I have my consecutive units here, and then I have something that follows and precedes it in a line. That's syntagm. But why do we even need this? You'll understand that when I explain associative relationships. Outside of this course, when we are not speaking, on the other hand, words acquire a different form of relationships. Those that have something in common are associated in the memory, resulting in a group marked by diverse relations. What do I mean by that? For example, take the French word enseignement, which is teaching. It will unconsciously call to mind a host of other words like enseigner, teach, which is the verb, renseigner, acquaint, etc., and all other words. All these words are related in some way, and we see the coordinations formed outside the discourse differ strikingly from those formed inside discourse. So those that are inside discourse and syntagmatic have kind of a structural value. And I'm not saying value in the Saussurean sense, I'm just using the word. So their structural value, for example, contre tout, against everyone. This is something that two structures are following each other and they have a meaning. But in associative relationships, we don't care about the structure of the or the linearity. Okay, we only care about the association of different words. So those formed outside discourse are not supported by linearity. Their seat is in the brain. They are a part of the inner storehouse that makes up the language of each speaker. They are associative relationships. So we can say that while syntagm is a line, associative relations are basically chaotic. They can go in different directions like this. Maybe it's a circle, we can say. I have a diagram that will illuminate this more in the next slide. Look at this. This is associative relationship. From the word enseignement, teaching, I go to enseigner, enseignant, apprentissage, éducation, and you can see that it's not just the words that have the similar form to enseignement. It's the ones that have the same meaning as well. So apprentissage is learning, is a word that comes to my mind when I hear enseignement. It completely comes to my mind because apprentissage and éducation are both about education and learning. And then enseignement has mon at the end, So when I think about it, I think of changement and armement, etc., or clément and justement. And these are associated in a circular manner in my mind. So this is not linear and this is not related to structure at all. It can be words based on different thing, analogy, contrast, meaning, whatever you think about. Um, the associations can come from anything that you want. Whereas a syntagm immediately suggests an order of succession, and this is what I meant by structure, an order of succession. So you go in a line and you have a succession. So uh, they don't just come without, let's say, any order. Words in a syntagm have are consecutive, have an order. For example, first I say this is a cat. Okay, I can't break up this sentence and say cat, this is a. That's not a syntagm. The syntagm should have a structure and a meaning. So and it's linear. So this is how it's different from associative. And syntagms have a fixed number of elements, and that's obvious because we are talking about sentences and its structures. But terms in associative family occur neither in fixed numbers nor in definite order. As you saw, it can be any sort of relationship between different words. Anything that is associated with it goes, and that's just how it works. And that's associative relationships. So that's everything that I wanted to say about course in general linguistics. This was the whole essay, and I mentioned everything that was in the essay. I tried my best to explain it all. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please like it and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I will do more essays like this. I will analyze them and try to simplify them for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to explain everything in detail. I hope this doesn't confuse you, but if you get confused, try to only listen to the parts that I have highlighted and I have really said that they are important, like the differences in language and value. Those parts are really important in this video. You could skip the next parts because maybe you don't even need them in your university, or maybe you don't need to understand course in general linguistics completely. I don't know with what purpose you are watching this video, but you're free to skip and rewatch and do everything you like to understand this, because that's my goal. I want you to be able to understand this essay after I explained it. And have a nice time, and I will see you in later videos.